Testing. Good morning. Raise your hand if you can hear me. That gets a room quiet immediately, and it makes me very happy. It's a trick you can all take with you. Welcome to day 2 of the Tap Into Hope conference, and thank you all for coming and being here. I want to take just a moment to thank Shannon and the TAP team, and Deb and Jody somewhere and her communications team for putting on this incredible first inaugural event. And so you guys are part of history, being the first people to attend this conference. And honestly, I'm blown away by the participation, by the speakers, by the organization. So kudos to you guys for putting this on. Pretty incredible feat. By the way, I'm Amanda. Hi. My name's Amanda Brott. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Director of Hope School Programs here in Springfield, we're the Hope part of the Tap Into Hope conference. Hope has grown. In the back of your booklets, there's kind of a story about the origin of where Hope came from, starting as a one-room schoolhouse for a young lady named Judy. Her family looked for a place for her to thrive and couldn't find one. And so they built their own, and they built a school called Hope, and originally Hope School for the Blind, because Judy had multiple disabilities, including blindness, and has since morphed into now serving literally thousands of individuals on the autism spectrum and with developmental disabilities in multiple states throughout the country. Right now we have our residential academy that's here in Springfield, where we serve children ages 5 to 22. In our residential program, most of the kids that live with us there have level 3 autism, require a lot of care. We're expanding that program and moving to the Melrose Park near Chicago area, coming soon, probably fall of this year. We have our private learning academies, our Learning Academy School. We have one here in Springfield, one in Glen Carbon area near St. Louis, and again, another coming soon in Melrose Park near Chicago. We also have our vocational academy here in Springfield, and just recently opened community day services for adults, providing vocational programming during the day for adults with developmental disabilities. Our autism clinics, which started here in Springfield, these provide ABA services to young, before elementary school, young kiddos. And those clinics are currently in Springfield, Illinois, Vernon Hills, Glen Carbon, O'Fallon, and Herrin, St. Louis, Missouri, Smyrna, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, Cordova, Tennessee, Brownsboro, Alabama, and Austin, Texas. We also provide services in therapy relief, which is in Springfield, St. Louis, and Nashville, Tennessee. Our Illinois Crisis Prevention Network, which is housed here in Illinois in Rockford and Springfield, and Hope Therapeutic Services in Wrentham, Massachusetts. So the footprint of Hope is large and continues to grow, and we have major plans to be, the provider of services to individuals with autism on the autism spectrum and people with developmental disabilities throughout the United States and potentially further. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, our platinum sponsor, Blue Cross Blue Shield, thank you very much, and our gold sponsor, Anderson Center for Autism. If you guys have any additional questions about Hope or about any services we provide or maybe any jobs that you guys are looking for, we're right outside. We've got a table. There's plenty of people that you can talk to. There's a whole table of Hope people over there, and we've got a booth with fun tchotchkes and things you can take away. Just quick housekeeping, there are QR codes on the tables when you go to your talks and hanging kind of throughout. Make sure that you're clocking in and out if you're getting those CEUs. All right, I'm going to be introducing, and this is the year that I started wearing readers, our keynote speaker for day 2. Russell Lehmann is a charismatic, activist, motivational speaker, and acclaimed author and poet for autism, mental health, and disabilities. He's the Global Disability Liaison at UCLA's Tarjan Center in Disabilities and captivates audiences with his powerful message of acceptance and resilience. Lehmann's work has had a positive and life-changing impact on many, and his advocacy and activism have helped to increase understanding and support for individuals in the disability community. Russell's talent lies in several areas, showcasing his diverse skills and abilities to deliver impactful, educational, and encouraging presentations that incorporate a range of emotions and perspectives, including significant elements of candor and humor. Russell emerged as a beacon of inspiration. He shares his intense and painful personal journey of being diagnosed with autism at the age of 12 after 5 weeks in a lockdown psychiatric ward for severe OCD and phobias. These struggles, on top of a lack of support, compassion, and understanding, led him to withdraw from the world for the next 15 years, resulting in prevalent isolation. Russell's transformed his unique experiences into a compelling narrative that challenges stereotypes, fosters understanding, and shifts perspective. His global reach continues to make waves, shaping perceptions and challenging societal norms. Please welcome Russell Lehmann.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Russell Lehmann. I'm going to talk about inclusion today, not just in the community, but of the community. I'm going to take you a little bit through my life journey, the ups and downs that continue to this day, the invisible nature of autism when it comes to my lived experience. I'm going to do a few spoken word poems. And then I'm probably going to leave, hopefully, about 15, 20 minutes for Q&A, right? I firmly believe, dialogue is where the real progress occurs. So I'm looking forward to have some back and forth with you at the end of my presentation. And don't hesitate to ask me anything. I'm an open book. And also, I'll be doing a book signing afterwards, which if you have more private questions you don't want to ask in front of everybody, feel free to ask them after my presentation in the back of the room there. So if you scan the QR code, and I'm probably going to walk around on the floor here. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to my social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. Not a fan of social media, but it's a necessary evil for me. Let's see, where am I going to start? I guess I'll start with a little background on my professional career. I'm an international disability rights advocate at UCLA. That is my first job. Like, when I was 25, I was living with my parents. I'd never had a job before. And I created this speaking career from absolutely nothing. So I'm 34 now. So that was about 9 years ago. And so last December, I live in Los Angeles. I was hired by UCLA to be their international disability rights advocate. So it's like the first job where I'm not like my own boss, right? And it's cool, but it's also an adjustment having to work with coworkers and have a boss dictate what you do, right? So I'm enjoying it, though. You know, I've been very isolated throughout the majority of my life. So just to have coworkers and, you know, be a part of a group moving things forward rather than just me traveling around by myself, doing my own thing. It's, again, that's part of me being of the community, not just simply in the community, because I can be in the community, but I might not feel included unless I'm a part of the community actively engaging in it. So I sit on the board for the ARC of the U.S., Autism Society of America. I'm on their council, as well as NECT for Autism. And my general mission is to use my hindsight and insight to generate foresight for others. Been through a lot of unnecessary pain in life. And obviously pain is inevitable, right? I talk a lot about just the nature of suffering when it comes to the human condition. But there's a lot of unnecessary pain in this world. And thankfully, I'm able to use those unpleasant occurrences to hopefully change society for the better, right? They're actually kind of material for my work, if you can think about it that way. So I can't imagine doing anything else. Thankfully, I was on the road less traveled, which allowed me to follow my heart and create this career that aligns with my truth. And for that, I'm very fortunate. I always try to see the silver linings and things. You know, I say autism might have taken from me everything I ever wanted, but in turn, it gave me everything I needed, right? And I firmly believe that's a situation with anything. Oftentimes in life, we don't get what we want, rather we get what we need, and what we need is not typically what we want, right? So we have to learn to embrace life, and it's a lot easier said than done. But I realized once I started running towards my struggles and my suffering, because I don't just have autism, I have severe OCD, depression, anxiety, and a lot of trauma on top of all that, with inadequate supports I still don't have. I've always tried to run away from my struggles, right? I was conditioned by the medical model of autism, where it's a deficit, it's something you have to overcome, something that you have to kind of get rid of, hide, conform with the large majority of the population, something that you are dealt with on a daily basis that you must battle with. And when the neurodiversity movement came along, started gaining momentum about 15, 20 years ago, I wasn't privy to that experience because I was isolated, right? So I just taught a class at UCLA this past quarter on autism and neurodiversity. UCLA is the first public university in California to offer a major in disability studies. And so to be able to literally go from the back of the room to the front of the room, have my college experience, albeit as a teacher, not a student, right? I never had the opportunity to go to college as a student. It's a beautiful moment, but that class taught to me, because we compared the medical and social models, that, wow, I still look at my autism as a deficit. You know, I still look at my autism as this thing I have to keep under control and that I have to hide from the world because I was conditioned like that for the last 3 decades. So teaching that class really exposed me. We had like 4 autistic students in our class, so they contributed a lot to my insight of, wow, you know, I don't have to feel ashamed anymore, because I still feel ashamed when I don't function to society's expectations. And I have a lot of internalized ableism, which is basically, if you're not familiar with the term, you know, you encounter a lot of ableism throughout your life, and then you project it onto yourself if you were conditioned in that manner. And I realize I beat the hell out of myself when I can't function to other people's expectations. And that makes it very difficult, on top of the challenges I already deal with not only my autism, but my mental health diagnoses as well. So all that to say that my profession is very cathartic. Again, like I said, I don't think I'd be able to do anything else in my life. And I really haven't done anything else in my life other than transmute my pain into purpose and passion. And with that, I've come a hell of a long way. So speaking of those 2 words, passion and purpose, you know, thankfully I came into my passion in my early 20s, right? I'm 34, so about 13 years ago. I was 21, again, living with my parents. I dropped out of public school in the 5th grade, so my last friend was 9 years prior to that. I never lived out my teenage years. I had an older sister, 4 years older, so I knew what teenagers, you know, were experiencing, and I was very envious and bitter at the world from being left behind, and again, not having access to anything. And when I tried to integrate back into society, it was a massive failing because I never got accommodations, and people would chastise me for, you know, not putting in enough effort or feeling too much. And so in my early 20s, I fell into a deep depression. And then I stopped being able to leave the house to go to the gym. And with my OCD, you know, my intrusive thought was, well, if you don't go to the gym, Russell, you can't eat. You're not going to burn a calorie, so you can't eat calories. And ultimately, I didn't have an eating disorder, but I definitely had disordered eating. And I fell into a deep depression for about 2 months. And one of the most sobering moments of my life was I was crying on the couch in my parents' house, just completely lost, you know, 21, I'm supposed to be in the prime of my life, and I go to itch my head, and I realize that my hair is falling out due to a lack of nutrients. And again, that was very sobering that, you know, here I am, like, closer to death, if you will, than I've ever been, and that, you know, that produced such an existential feeling within me that, thankfully, at that time, I was reading Edgar Allan Poe. I really took solace in his dark message and how he was able to turn his darkness into beauty, and the fact that he was able to take the unpleasant situations in his life and create art out of them. And so I tried my hand at poetry, and poetry became the best friend I had always yearned for, you know, to really be able to put everything I was ashamed of onto a piece of paper. That piece of paper did not talk back. It did not invalidate me. It took all that I was. Some of my earliest poems on paper I still have, and the paper is wrinkled with tear stains as I was writing. I was crying. But then to be able to read the poem back to myself and hear it in such a beautiful way with the rhythm and all of the rhymes and nuances and a piece of art made me realize that I can create something I'm proud of out of something I'm ashamed of. And that was really my first taste in passion. The Latin etymology of the word passion means to suffer. Latin etymology comes from the Latin word pati, meaning to suffer. If you've heard of the saying, the passion of the Christ, that means the suffering of the Christ, right? And I firmly believe that through our pain, we come upon our passion. And then when we nurture our passion, we cultivate our purpose. And then with our purpose, we progress throughout life. Right? I like to call it the 4 Ps: pain, passion, purpose, progress. I'm thinking about writing a book about it, so nobody steal that idea right now, right? I think it's a very catchy title. It'll sell really well. Just have to find the time to write it. And so, yeah, thankfully through my pain, I was able to find the outlet of poetry, which was my passion. Poetry maybe being the 5th P, who knows? And then through my passion of poetry, I was able to self-publish a book, which led to me sharing my story, which ultimately led me in my mid-20s to pursue a speaking career, and then through all that, I have progressed throughout life. So I've come a long way. I've come a long way. You know, that's me around age 8. You know, I think that was in my house on an Easter Sunday. My mom was, you know, right next to me. I cropped her out of the photo. Sorry, Mom. But you can just tell, you know, I'm in my own house there on a weekend, you know, no obligations other than to celebrate Easter with my family. And I'm, you know, just, my mom and I were just interviewed the other day. And my mom told the interviewer that one of the few helpful doctors I had when I was younger, the first time he saw me, he told my parents that Russell is a terrified child. And I really was. I mean, I always had my hood on. I could not engage with the outside world. I could barely leave my house because I had such severe phobias of open spaces and bugs. I had a severe speech impediment. As you can see, I'm sucking my thumb. I sucked my thumb until the age of 14. So when somebody asked me my name, you know, lucky for me, my speech impediment was I couldn't really pronounce S's too well. And guess what? I have 2 S's in my first name. So when people asked me my name, I would say my name, and they'd look at me confounded as like, what the hell did he just say? Which made me retreat even more because, like, why would I talk to people if they can't even tell what I'm saying when I have the courage to say it? So I had a speech impediment, which led to me really not talking much at all other than to my parents. I wore my hood. I never made eye contact. I had to teach myself to make eye contact. I was very much shut down, a prisoner inside my own body. And that lasted, you know, I mean, it still happens to this day. That little child is still in front of me, you know, obviously. That was then. This is now. But again, I'm only like this when I'm doing my thing, right? This is my thing. This is my purpose. I live independently in Los Angeles. I've only been fully independent for the last 3 years. I moved there when I was 31. And this is the first time, not only am I fully independent, but this is the first time in 20 years I have friends. First time in 20 years, you know, I'm experiencing all the things I never experienced in my teenage years and my 20s. And it's very difficult. Only 5% of autistic adults are independent. And honestly, I think that's kind of a high number because not one day goes by where I think, why did I leave my mom's side? It's very difficult to struggle with one's own mind, struggle with one's own place in society, since I have been an outcast the majority of my life, and now I am trying to reintegrate for the first time in over 2 decades without any support. Not that I haven't applied for support. I get rejected because I applied for support at my local disability center, and they said, Russell has autism, but it's not disabled him enough. Simply because I show up and perform quite well, right? This is what most people see when I'm talking about my passion and purpose. They don't see that when I was a child and I showed my struggles, society chastised the hell out of me. So as a defense mechanism, I had to learn how to mask really well. And I had to learn how to hide my meltdowns and hide my rituals at home where nobody was going to see me and chew me out because of it. And now that's backfiring because I don't get the supports because society told me to hide it. Now society tells me to prove it. And the hypocrisy, the painful irony that occurs in my existence is just confounds me at times because, you know, it's like I'm getting pointed in this direction and that direction, and, you know, I just don't know what to do to be able to get what I need. I need help getting help. A lot of people don't believe me because there's a lot of infantilization of autism still. That when I go to a doctor and say, I need this or I need that or I am experiencing this, a lot of people don't understand the gravity of my words. I'm a very delicate individual. I'm very fragile. I'm very strong-spirited at the same time. Those can obviously coexist. But when I say I'm having a bad day, it's not just a bad day, right? It is a catastrophic day where I stay in the same spot and I cry and I have to call my mom and not even talk to her, just cry into the phone. Because I don't have friends that are that close to me. Like, let's be honest, you know, a guy in his 30s, I don't have that kind of relationship where I can call him up and just bawl into the phone. So it's very difficult being independent. It's very fulfilling at the same time, though. And again, the choice I have to make on a daily basis is be dependent, go back and live with my mom, and lose the satisfaction of relationships, of many things that do fulfill me in life, or take a huge risk and struggle a hell of a lot more and get that fulfillment. So it's a double-edged sword either way, right? So only 5% of autistic adults are independent, and again, I think that number is surprisingly high because, you know, I It's a big, big struggle of mine. So don't let this fool you. Again, that little Russell is still within me. I have meltdowns very frequently. I really struggle with emotional regulation. But when it's my time to show up and perform, I can perform quite well. Right. So I've come a long way. And it's really because I found my passion and purpose. People ask me how I went from that kid to that man. But again, I'm still that kid. That man is still, obviously that man is still that kid. But I do always go back to a quote by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "He who has a why can bear almost anyhow." Right? He who has a why can bear almost anyhow. And I became very curious about my life through my suffering, because I realized, every weekend I would stay in my bedroom because I would get so bitter and fed up that I couldn't hang out with friends, or that I didn't even have friends, or, I was just so infuriated and struggling on top of that I wasn't getting support, that apparently people didn't want to be with me in the outside world because nobody would accommodate me, that I really began to question, why am I going through this? Why me? And if you think about it, when we all go through difficult times, that's when we ask why. Why me? Why again? Why now? When we're having a great time with our friends, we're not stopping everybody and saying, hey guys, let's think about why do we deserve this happy moment right now? No, it's only in the difficult moment do we ask why. And in my opinion, why is the most underused word in the English language. I started to ask why, not only about my suffering, but about what was going to get me through the suffering. Why was I the way I was? So I had all this time in my isolation to really look inward and learn about myself much earlier than the average human. And that helped me to be curious not only about myself, but the external world as well. And so now that I'm back in society and still trying to reintegrate fully, I do have the wisdom that not many people in society have, because it's almost like I've been on the sidelines of the game of life my entire life, and I was able to study the game. Other people just dove headfirst into the game. So now, I can do things really well, but the other things I can really struggle with. And so with that, I say, with autism, I excel at the extraordinary, but I really struggle with the simple. I can travel the world by myself doing public speeches, but some days I get trapped inside, some weeks I get trapped inside my house for 5 days on end. Going grocery shopping is incredibly difficult for me. It's something I never had to do in my prior 30 years. And there are days when I run out of food. And my friends aren't familiar with autism, so it's not like I call them friends, but I certainly don't feel safe with them. And that's unfortunate. But, I have faith. I'm just starting out on my journey. I'm just beginning. But I will tell my friend that I do feel safe somewhat confiding in, and she'll be like, why don't you just do Instacart? Not knowing that, food is one of my comfort things. I want my food, and I don't honestly want a stranger touching my food, especially my produce, right? And I'm very picky about my produce, right? My bananas need to be a certain kind of green. So if I can't put that note in the Instacart, because if they deliver the groceries and they aren't that shade of green, I'm going to suffer twice as much, because now I spent money on this thing I don't want, right? So I can't even get the groceries delivered. My mom isn't in the vicinity to help me out. And so, there are days where I can't get to the grocery store, and I wake up every day with the heavy burden of not only having to go through my routine, which I do not like my routine. My routine just helps me function. I don't like it. I like in that it helps me function because my autism runs on rigidity and structure and anchors throughout the day. But I want to change up my routine. But that would be playing with fire, because if I'm changing up my routine, it's like taking a Jenga block out of the Jenga tower and putting it back up. But, maybe you can do it, but at the same time, there's a chance the whole thing is going to come crashing down. But every day I try to get up and go to the grocery store. Maybe on the 5th day, I get out of the house and I drive 5 minutes to the grocery store, and I make it. On the way home, I am on top of the damn world, right? My windows are down, I'm blasting the music, I'm singing along. And with that, it makes me realize how grateful I am for my life, because how many people find such fulfillment after buying food for themselves, right? I am on top of the world. And that just goes to show you, when I struggle with the simple, it's annoying and people don't understand it. But at the same time, when I finally do achieve that simple thing, oh my God, it's better than anything I can accomplish that is much more difficult, right? Or seemingly difficult for others. So all that to say that I've come a long way, but I still struggle. I'm realizing, I still think one day I'm going to wake up and, I'm going to get the hang of this autistic thing, and I'm going to have a smooth ride the rest of the way. And then a few days later, I remember I have autism. Autism isn't invisible to you. It's also invisible to me. When I'm having a good day and I look in the mirror, I don't see autism. I see Russell. Our brains prioritize visual stimulation, right? If you think about all your memories or your dreams, they tend to have a lot of images in them, not so much sounds or smells. So when my brain doesn't see my autism, it's hard for me to remember, especially on a day when I'm feeling good. Now, if I had a cast on my arm, I'd be able to look at the cast and be like, oh, okay, even if it's not hurting my broken arm, I probably shouldn't pick up that heavy item because, look, there's a cast on my arm. I'm reminded I have a broken arm. There's no visual reminder for my autism. So on good days, I want to keep it up, but then it's like my autism tackles me from behind and says, not so fast, Russell. Remember, I'm always going to be here with you. And I like to think that is my little Russell catching up to me, right? Because I still have a lot of healing to do, and I'm learning that I need to take him with me rather than trying to escape him, right? Because I need to give that little Russell the love he never got outside of his mother. So it's a beautiful journey of pain, of self-compassion, of love, of healing, of sometimes questioning my purpose for sure, but ultimately pursuing my purpose and realizing that it all does work out in the end, and that I can transmute my struggles into success. And I found my success not in spite of my struggles, but rather because of them. All right, so I'm going to recite one of my spoken word poems, and this is a letter to my younger self titled Dear Russell. Dear Russell, you're going to go through some things in your life. You're going to go through some real tough things in your life. I know you're just a young boy now, but I want to speak up and warn you of what's about to go down. Pretty soon, you're going to lose all of your friends. Pretty soon, you're going to see life through a different lens. This probably doesn't even make sense, but pretty soon, you're going to go insane and wish you were dead. I know you're pretty popular now, but pretty soon you're going to be laughed at by other kids who won't know how. You became such a pathetic wimp who's too scared to leave his house, who's too scared to be in a crowd, who thought a whisper was so loud. But listen, you will never be a wimp. You will never be weak. You'll grow up to be stronger than a million ancient gods of Greece. Now, there are going to be nights when you just stay up and cry. There are going to be nights when you contemplate suicide. There are going to be nights where you just want to die, but you will have too much pride to give up on your life. You're going to be admitted to the psych ward 3 times, where you'll see naked people trying to find walls to climb. You're going to be rushed to the ER way too much, but these experiences are the reason you're going to grow up to be so tough. You're going to have your dreams come crashing down just because some pathetic adult didn't want you around, and you're going to have your heart break as if it were made of glass, and have no friends to fall back on when the love of your life packs up her bags. You're going to wish you were normal, just like everybody else. But I need you to remember that you have a very bright future, even though you're going to go through hell. Russell, I need you to be prepared for all the obstacles you're going to face. And at times, you're going to feel like you're trapped in a maze. And at times, you're going to feel like you've been so debased. And at times, you're going to go into a craze and curse at the gods for why they made you this way. But Russell, I need you to listen to me. You might not be that different now, but you will be. Your life is going to seem like an utter disaster at times, but within you is the strength you need to succeed at being the best possible human being you can be. So keep your chin up. Keep your eyes on the prize, because you'll far surpass everyone's expectations of what we can accomplish in our lives, but it won't be your or my surprise. Thank you. So we hear the word autism a lot, of course, right? I like to say a lot of people are becoming more familiar with the word autism, but not necessarily the world of autism. And I find it when it comes to autism and inclusion and other words, that we tend to use them so much in society, they kind of get hollowed out, right? The more you use a word, the less it means, in a way, right? If I were to go up to everybody I ever met and said, I love you, but then, I told my mom I love her, what would be the difference, Like my mom, if I said I love you to everyone I met, what's the differentiation between saying it to some people I actually don't really love versus my mom who I dearly love, right? So the more you use the word in a situation where it's not fully applicable, it can get hollowed out. So we hear inclusion, autism, and so to remind myself and others of what the words really, truly stand for, I always go back to the etymology, the origin of why they are called the words that they are. and the etymology of autism. The word autism is composed of two parts, aut and ism. Surprise, surprise. The prefix of the word is aut, which comes from the Greek word autos, meaning self, and the suffix ism, also from Greek, implies a state of being or condition. So from that, we can loosely translate autism to a state of self. I'm very much an inwardly focused individual. I have a very rich inner world. I enjoy my inner world. It's where I've resided the majority of my life because it's safe from the external world that is not made for people like me. A lot of people try to pull me out of that world, though, whether it's during a meltdown or if I'm being reclusive or if I'm not making eye contact or if I have my hood on. A lot of authority figures, doctors, teachers, coaches, some peers, try to pull me out of my state of self, not knowing that is where I reside. And it frustrates me when we talk about inclusion, and I'll get into more of this later, but again, a lot of people expect me to leave my world behind to be included in this world, a world I don't particularly, I'm not too fond of. So just to remind you all that, when you see an individual who might be detaching from an environment or might seem standoffish, I get misunderstood on a daily basis because if I'm in my state of self, I'm not engaging with the people around me, and it makes it, sometimes I guess I look like I'm apathetic or cold or don't want to be around people, when in reality, I'm just in my state of self. I enjoy your company, but I also enjoy my own company, right? A lot of people take behavior at face value, unfortunately. But I always say, especially with invisible disabilities, ask yourself, what am I not seeing? Because sometimes what we do not see is much more important than what we do see. And a lot of people look, a lot of people see, a lot of people perceive, but few people observe. And there's a difference. Observing, the dictionary definition, is to perceive and then determine what to register as significant or insignificant. Observing is making the distinction of what you are seeing and what you are not seeing and what is important and not important. But a lot of people just look and take that in and say that's all there is to it. When not knowing there's a state of self, an inner world that they have no access to. Or they're not even, maybe they do know I might be in my own world, but, whether they're uncomfortable being around somebody who's disabled or whether they don't know much about autism or whether they just don't have the time and energy, very few people knock on the door to my world. Right? So just a foundational reminder to rely on as I move through this presentation. So an autism analogy for you is when I'm having a really good day and I forget I have autism, right? I'm crushing it, I have food in the house, I had coffee with a friend, I'm not anxious today. What a weird feeling. It's a beautiful feeling, but it's very foreign. I'm like, wow, am I normal today? This feels pretty cool, right? And some days I feel like an armadillo, like a nice, content armadillo walking along the side of the highway. And I'm feeling myself. I'm kind of strutting along, saying, like, I'm doing it. I'm doing this thing called functioning. But then it's like a car zooms past on the highway, and it startles me, the armadillo. And what do armadillos do when they get scared? They curl into a ball, right? And that happens a lot with me. Now, sometimes I curl all the way into the ball, as you can see on the bottom right there. Sometimes it's stage by stage. Sometimes it's only 20% into a ball. But that is not only my sense of state of self, but it's also my defense mechanism. I get scared and I shut down, much like a computer. It's like there's a virus out there, so I shut down to not encounter what is fearing me. And with autism, there tends, for most individuals, to be a subtle inflammation of the amygdala, which creates our fight or flight response, right? And so I am always somewhat on edge. And when you are on edge and in a semi-state of survival, your sensory input awareness goes up, right? So a lot of people, again, an example of infantilizing autism, a lot of people think, oh, Russell has autism, he can't go to concerts because he can't handle the noise. And I'm like, no, it's not that I can't handle the noise, it's that I hear it louder than you. If you heard it as I heard it, you wouldn't be able to handle it either. But they act like I can't do what they can do because I'm hearing the same thing they are. I'm not, because I'm in a semi-state of survival. My senses are always up. And that's obviously what leads, for me anyway, to overstimulation and shutdowns and meltdowns. So I will curl into that ball. Now, if we were to see an armadillo in the wild curl into a ball, we would not question that armadillo. We would trust that the armadillo is probably doing what it thinks is best for itself in that moment. But for some reason, when I have a meltdown, which I actually need at times to regulate my emotions, because after a meltdown, it's very cathartic. Obviously there are very unpleasant meltdowns as well. But when I'm having a meltdown due to overwhelm, overstimulation, a lot of emotional congestion, I can get all of that out and process it. It's almost like shutting down your phone when you're updating your phone, right? You have to shut the phone down. It ceases to function in order to update. A lot of people don't understand that about my meltdown. So they try to fix it, or they try to stop it. And again, if you're not trying to stop an armadillo from curling into a ball, why do you trust an armadillo more than you trust me to know what's best for myself, right? When I say I can't do it, I can't do it. And I don't want the platitude of saying, "Oh, Russell, I think you can do it." No, I know what I can do. I'm 34. I'm an adult, right? So again, a lot of people don't trust that I know what's best for me after over 3 decades of living with my autism. But we trust an armadillo, right? And I think that's kind of ironic, that we trust an armadillo that we know nothing about more than a human that we're trying to help and connect with the best of intentions. But a lot of people try to help when they don't know how to help, and ultimately that can hurt because it can make things more complicated. So I can be on all these levels, and a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, I can be like that armadillo at the top one moment, but then in a flip of a switch with that car driving by, I curl into a ball, and a lot of people don't understand the fluidity of my functioning capabilities, or incapabilities, if you will. It's very up and down. It's very up and down. I can be having a great morning, then have a massive 2-hour meltdown in the middle of the day, and then feel recharged, recalibrated, and have a great afternoon, right? It all depends on the day. Every day is different from me. And there are days where, yeah, I get back from traveling the world. I was just in China about a month ago, and I got back, but then I was struggling so much because I was tired, and, change is hard for me. Even though I enjoy travel, it's still hard for me. I like to say with my autism, I fear everything that I desire, right? It gets in it makes things that I want in life a lot more difficult. However, a lot of people don't understand, well, Russell, you're just in China, but now you can't meet me for coffee. You have to cancel at the last minute. You're not putting enough effort in, or this or that. So a lot of people don't understand that, again, I really can't fake it, even though I can mask really well. When I can't do something, I can't fake it. If I'm feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated, I really can't leave the house, right? Because it's just too much. So sometimes I can't fake it, and sometimes I can't make it. And that's okay with me, but a lot of people, unfortunately, that I'm trying to nurture relationships with in LA who know nothing about autism, they just don't understand that, even though I try to explain it to them time and time again. Which makes it hard to be included, right? Because a lot of people will invite me out. I have this one friend, and I always say, quote unquote friend, because I don't really have a comparison as to what a friend is. I haven't had one in so long. So there's someone I'd like to be a friend with, and I appreciate they invite me out. And I have told them, keep inviting me out. I might cancel at the last minute 80% of the time, but that does not mean I don't want to hang out with you. But I can tell through the subtle ways I have to, again, I guilt trip myself. That internalized ableism of, damn it, Russell, why can't you were looking forward to this, but now you're crying and you can't get out of the house. And then I have to text the person. I feel like I'm letting them down, and then they kind of show that they're let down, and they're like, bummer. And yeah, it's very difficult. And then, with this specific friend, I can notice that she's not inviting me out as much as she used to, even though I've tried to explain it to her, the reasons behind that. So a little overview of my life journey before I get into the topic of inclusion this is what autism looks like for me, right? It's just my manifestation of autism. Autism manifests in various ways. So age 7, I really began experiencing vicious meltdowns, panic attacks, depression, severe phobias. Really had a hard time going to school. First grade, could barely leave my mom's side on the first day of school. In kindergarten, my mom would drop me off, only to pick me up 6 hours later to find that I was not with the group of kids, but in the cubby where you hang your jacket. I was sitting in there with my hood on, and the teachers didn't know why I was acting that way, and I wasn't responding to them when they would come up to me, so they just left me there. And so we had all the signs. I mean, I didn't even I grunted until the age of 3.5, so I didn't even start forming words until, 9 months into my third year of life. So there was always a sign of autism, and my mom brought up autism to her doctor, but again, she kind of got the treatment of, he'll grow out of it, or Sometimes she would even get the refrigerator mother treatment, which is basically, you're a cold mom, you need to give him more love. That's why he's the way he is. So there's a lot of blaming on my mom, so we kind of she stepped off the, bringing up the autism because she would get basically insulted or just platitudes that don't worry about it, you're being overprotective. Age 9 is when OCD came into the picture, and it really began to consume my livelihood. OCD is the second most common dual diagnosis with autism after ADHD. And OCD for me is probably the most difficult part of my existence. I like to call it the existential game of whack-a-mole, right? It controls one area of my life, then I can control it, I can get it controlled in that area, but then it morphs and pops up in another area of my life, right? I never had problem with eating until I turned 21, then all of a sudden, I can't eat at all because my OCD was giving me the intrusive thought, Russell, if you eat one thing, you're gonna gain 20 pounds. And the thing about OCD is a lot of people don't understand that the intrusive thoughts are almost always completely irrational, right? Again, I told one of my friends maybe a year ago, and I have a hard time confiding in people about my intrusive thoughts because they tend to be the antithesis of that individual's character. So for example, if you're brought up in a very religious household and you have OCD, your intrusive thoughts are going to be more than likely about, going to hell, being a sinner, things like that. I'm a very pure, innocent, kind guy, so a lot of my images were very graphic, very violent. I couldn't even tell my mom because here I am as a 9-year-old getting these intrusive thoughts about murdering my family, and I thought they were my thoughts, and so again, talk about guilt-tripping oneself, and I couldn't even tell my mom because I thought she was going to disown me, and I didn't even know, obviously, what OCD was. So, that was traumatic in and of itself. But even now when I tell, again, my friend last year when I was really struggling with an intrusive thought, and a lot of times they're very embarrassing, and I don't want to admit that, something so weird and so irrational can really just completely disable me. But I told her my thought, and I opened up, and I love her to death. She's very understanding, but these subtle dismissive responses can hurt a lot. Words matter. They always say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. No, I would rather be hurt by sticks and stones than words, to be honest, right? And so I told her this intrusive thought of mine, and she said, well, Russell, that's never going to happen, right? And inside I'm like, yeah, I know, but I know it's not going to happen, but I feel like it is. That's why it's a mental illness, right? And it's hard for people to come to grips with that. That even though my OCD at that age told me, Russell, if you don't wash your hand 200 times a day, your mom is going to catch cancer from you, who doesn't have cancer, and she's going to drop dead in front of you unless you keep washing your hands. A lot of people don't understand how, if you know that's not going to happen, why would you obviously fear, and why would you let it take over your life by doing rituals hour after hour after hour? So OCD to this day, it morphs. About 30% of individuals with OCD are treatment resistant due to its adaptability. It's really intertwined throughout the foundation of my existence. Sometimes I don't know if I'm doing something because I want to, or if it's just something my OCD is telling me to do. And having OCD and autism makes my routine even more rigid and more inescapable when I want to try to change it up. So ultimately, I was hospitalized for 5 weeks due to that OCD and the phobias, depression, and anxiety that go with that. And I was discharged after those 5 weeks, which very traumatic, very traumatic. The first day we entered, I was clinging to my mom's side as we got buzzed into the front doors. And again, my hood is on, I'm just hanging on to her hip. And they immediately say, Russell, you're gonna go see your room, your mom's gonna come do the intake papers with us. And I immediately started having a meltdown, which we didn't know was a meltdown because I wasn't diagnosed with autism yet. And I was like, no, I need my mom. Mom, stay with me, don't leave, don't leave. And again, they were ushering my mom in to the room to do the intake papers, and I was ushered into my room where I'd be staying for the next few weeks. And I was staring outside of my window in my hospital bedroom, having a full-on meltdown, just sobbing for 4 hours. I don't know why. I have to think that they probably kept her longer than she needed to be kept just to see how I would respond. Psych wards, the head games they play with the patients it just confounds me. But anyway, I looked out that window for 4 hours, And there's a playground outside, and I'll forever have that image burned into my brain, just wanting my mom. And again, there was a staff person trying to distract me the whole time. Hey, Russell, play this game with me. Russell, your mom will be back. It'll be okay. Not knowing that I was having like an existential crisis in that moment. Your distraction wasn't going to pull me out of it. I told you earlier that passion means to suffer. Well, compassion means to suffer with. I received no validation in that moment for what I was feeling. They dismissed my feelings by saying, oh, just play this game with me. Just, try to, forget about what you're feeling. Play this game with me. Again, enter my world, Russell. I'm not going to suffer with you and enter your world. So it was day after day of that. They would tackle kids in the hallway if they ran. There was an isolation room, which I kind of liked because I was away from everybody. So, but yeah, it was very old school, very archaic practices, and the exposure therapies I went through, again, were just not professional by any means. So ultimately discharged without a diagnosis. I was just there for 5 weeks. They said Russell has OCD, and he's just gonna have to leave because we have a waiting list. And they did, and you can't keep everybody there forever. I understand that, but unfortunately, no diagnosis. And then 6 months later, I got the diagnosis of autism from the same pediatrician that my mom brought up autism to 12 years prior. So it's been a very difficult, frustrating journey trying to get support and help and answers. But at age 12, I finally got an answer. I have autism. And I was like, cool, okay, now I have a blueprint, because I've always been very self-aware. Sometimes I'm too self-aware. I ruminate a lot. And I always fixate on like how I am being perceived by others, and all of that stuff that one typically goes to when they have a high level of self-awareness. But with autism, I was like, okay, maybe I have some closure now as to why I'm different. It might give me some answers in that regard. But again, back in 2003 when I was diagnosed, it kind of made me stick out even more, because when I had to leave that hospital, they ordered me to go to a public school, a school I had never been to, the very next day. So what came as a very pleasant surprise that I was leaving that hospital, getting to go home, when my mom told me the next day that I had to be integrated in a school without any kind of IEP or anything, it turned that happiness into frustration. And again, here I was just getting used to the routine of the hospital. Now they expect me to go to a school I'd never been to before. And obviously that did not work out at all. So ultimately that's when I dropped out of public school and just took online classes until I got my GED at age 19. But losing that bridge to society in the form of physical schooling really led me to be isolated. And that's what, started my journey of isolation for over 15 years. But having that diagnosis of autism did make me stick out even more, because it was 22 years ago. And now when I was in that middle school that they expected me to go to after my hospitalization, I wasn't just that weird kid in the corner of the room with this hood on, not making eye contact. I was that weird autistic kid. And a lot of teachers are still like, well, what is autism? So I was looked upon more as a spectacle, unfortunately. The interesting thing with my invisible disability is that it's either completely invisible or I am very visible in the form of sticking out like a sore thumb, right? And so there's no balance. It's either I'm completely invisible or very visible, and that's difficult to simply get by in the world and be treated simply like a human, because it's typically my label that gets more attention, but then it doesn't get any attention when I'm doing well, right? I'm going to do another spoken word poem. This one is a quick spoken word poem about being in that school for 2 weeks. But again, they always tried to pull me out of my world. And so this is titled, What Does It Feel Like to Not Be Heard? A penny for my thoughts? I'm the one who has to pay the cent. A cold ear was what I bought, now all my pennies have been spent. I have so much to say, but no one will hear. I'm regarded as the reflection of Dracula in the mirror. I'm not there. So I just disappear into my mind, where at least my thoughts are sincere. What does it feel like to not be heard? It cuts deeper than the slur of any derogatory word. To be observed yet deferred only exacerbates the hurt. I deserve to be heard. Now I'm starting to sound absurd. I'm told that I am lazy, that I want no part of school, that I'm acting a fool. This drives me crazy. All I need is some help, a friendly outreach of a hand. But the only hand I was dealt was that no teacher gave a damn. Thank you. So again, I like to think I'm an outlier, but I'm not, unfortunately. A lot of individuals have been in my shoes where it gets just like time and time again, I'm either misunderstood, don't get the supports I need. When I do get the supports, they're not individualized, so it makes it more difficult for me to interact with the individual because they try to do the therapy a certain way rather than just meeting me halfway where I am. And again, I like to think I'm an outlier, but I'm realizing more and more I'm not, and that there's still a lot of people out there who are not just 25 as I was when I started to find my way, but are 35, 45, 55, still living with family members, still never having been able to hold down a job, never experiencing their college years, not having friends. And I enjoy talking about, not enjoy, but I take pride in talking about what's not talked about when it comes to, quote unquote, the dark side of autism. You know, autistic adults are 3 times more likely to commit suicide. 85% of autistic adults with a college degree are unemployed. 5% independence rate. They estimated prevalence of autism in American prisons is twice that of the normal population. I mean, there's a lot of heartbreaking stats out there. And, you know, it's still April, and, you know, April is my least favorite month because we tend to say, you know, autism is a superpower. Well, if it's my superpower, it's also my kryptonite. You know, I love it and I hate it. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It can be both. It's a thing called life. And so I get frustrated when people sugarcoat autism and say it's a superpower or just a different way of thinking. And it might be for them, but the thing is they say we. They include all the people in the autistic community. And that frustrates me because I can only speak for my existence. I don't know what it's like to live anybody else's life. And I don't know what anybody else's autism is like except for my own. So we really need to pinpoint and get more intentional about how we talk about autism and not just talk in superfluous language that, you know, might make a good soundbite, but rather talk about the very disheartening facts out there that, you know, again, if it wasn't for me creating my speaking career, I'd probably still be living with my parents. And that is not okay because that's not being included. I had to force my way into society, right? And now I'm finally being included. And hell, I couldn't even go through the front door because nobody would open it. So I had to find a way to either like dig through the basement or go through the window, go through the back door. I live a very unconventional life because the normal path does not work for me because I am not built for the normal path. Yet society always wants to put me on the normal path. And I wish we talked about that more in the month of April. So, when it comes to isolation, according to the National Institute on Aging, a study came out last year, the risks of prolonged isolation are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Social isolation and loneliness have been estimated to shorten a person's lifespan by as many as 15 years. And like I get that, right? I think, you know, there's a reason that solitary confinement is one of the worst punishments we have in our prison system. We're social creatures. You know, not having access to friends, and again, not without trying. My family always tried to mainstream me back into school, always tried to help me get into a basketball group or a football group, and it just was met with complete and utter ignorance. That made me bitter towards the outside world. And then I ruminated and stewed about it in my isolation because I had no distractions. And the defense mechanism that one has to develop unconsciously to get through that painful isolation while the brain is still developing. The brain does not stop developing until around the age of 25. So when I was 14, 18, 21, 24, 25, I developed this mindset that I am realizing now is really getting in the way of me, you know, feeling safe with others, is I demonize the outside world in my isolation. I was like, if the outside world doesn't want me, maybe I don't want it. Maybe it's nothing but filled with bad people. So now when I go to try to make a friend for the first time in 20 years in LA, I'm realizing I have a lot of walls up because I feel like they're just going to chew me out if I am vulnerable in any extent. Or that they're going to chastise me, even though I've never met this person before and they seem like a good person. I, again, feel like they will. And so the isolation isn't just in that moment. It lasts a lifetime, especially when the brain is still developing, and we need to remember that. We can't expect a student or someone we're working with to have been isolated and then trying to reintegrate them into a classroom or a sport or anything without realizing that there's always going to be a ripple effect and a leftover effect from their period of isolation. And the same goes for any kind of hurt. Like when you hurt someone, they're not just hurt in that moment. That hurt is ingrained in their memory, you know. They might be triggered. in the future, so that hurt lasts a lifetime as well. And just to underscore the power that we all have in our hands, that we might not think we're making a big difference, but we are, for better or for worse. Right? So always to be intentional about what you do, and again, a key to that is observing and registering what is significant and not, so you can take a step back and act rather than react to a situation. So I have a lot of bones to pick with society, as you can probably tell. I love society at the same time, though. Again, it's Walt Whitman has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Do I contradict myself? So I do. I am a large man. I contain multitudes." Right? That was in his poem, Song of Myself. And I fully relate. I mean, I love Walt Whitman. That guy used to wrestle trees in the forest. I mean, if that's not weird, I don't know what is, and I love it. Because trees, I relate to trees more than I do people. So the fact that he took it a step further and would wrestle young saplings while he was living out in the woods is a beautiful thing to me. So I love reading about that guy. But yeah, I contradict myself. Again, love my autism, hate my autism, love society, hate society, because society is very beneficial. Obviously, we all want to be part of society, but it also hurts when I try so damn hard to be part of society and I'm still met with a lot of ignorance. And again, a lot of it is unintentional. Typically, when we say the word ignorant, we kind of get a negative connotation behind it, but ignorance is a fact of life. Like, we're all existentially ignorant. Nobody knows everything. I'm completely ignorant of every one of your life's journey. Right? But the key is to be aware of that ignorance. Too often we forget about our own ignorance, and that can lead to unintentional arrogance. And when you think you know when you don't, that really closes off the mind and doesn't allow for new perceptions and to take in things that aren't what they might seem they should be to you. So a few of my bones to pick with inclusion is, the first thing is, what does it say about our society when we actually have to remind ourselves to include others? Again, it's a pretty sad state of affairs that we're putting so much effort into simply including others, right? And I find that too often we focus on the end goal of inclusion instead of just letting it happen naturally. You can't force inclusion. If you're forcing inclusion, it's not going to work out. I hate to tell you that. But we can cultivate a safe and nurturing environment where people will eventually feel included. But I feel like in the past 10 years, we've been just rushing to try to include everybody and have this feeling of inclusion, when in reality, you can't get there that way. You can't get there that way, right? And inclusion is a practice. You know, sometimes I speak at schools and they say we have a fully inclusive environment, but then it's almost like they take their foot off the pedal and stop trying because now they've reached in a fully inclusive environment, which is a misnomer, right? Because what is inclusive to you might not be inclusive to me. There's an inclusion paradox, right? If I'm in a classroom and I'm overstimulated, but yet the autistic student next to me is stimming, while that might be acceptable for him and inclusive for him to be able to stim in class, it might be overwhelming for me and not feel like I'm included, right? Because it's overstimulated. So there's an inclusion paradox, and inclusion is a practice. We can't stop doing it just because we think we're getting better at it. It's like if you're LeBron James or Michael Jordan or one of the top athletes in the world, you don't stop practicing just because you're on the top of your game. You actually have to practice more to maintain that you're on top of your game, right? I feel objectified somewhat by the rush to include. Again, why am I, the disabled guy, the one who always has to be the object of inclusion? Why can't I include you in my world? Again, state of self, right? I have a very rich inner world. I love showing people around my inner world all the uniqueness that goes on in my mind, all the special interests I have, all the things that mean a lot to me, but that really don't mean a lot to other people. I can share with them a different perspective than they're used to. I am a very atypical creature, and a lot of people can learn a lot about the human condition when they walk into my state of self. But the thing is, a lot of people don't understand that I have my own state of self and that I have my own inner world, and that when you invite me, that is you inviting me. There's a power dynamic there. Right? If you're inviting me to the table, that's great. I may want to go. I might not want to go, but it's like, why can't I invite you to my table sometimes? Why am I always getting plucked out of my world and put into this world? And again, I might want to at times, but it gets tiring when people don't ask first, because sometimes I don't even want to be included. You know? Some things I just don't like that a lot of people think all humans like, where I don't. And again, it's not enough to know that I'm included. I need to feel that I'm included, that I'm welcome, that I belong. Again, what we know and what we feel in life tend to directly contradict one another. So I can know I'm included, but I can feel like I'm very excluded. We know that driving a car is much more dangerous than flying in an airplane, but we feel like it's a lot safer, right? So oftentimes throughout life, what we know and what we feel directly contradict one another. So just because I know you're putting in effort, I need to feel that you're putting in effort too. And the way you do that is by building rapport and building trust with the individual by, guess what, entering their world. Everybody has their own inner world, and I can guarantee you that everybody appreciates when somebody knocks on the door to their world. But with this rush to include, again, there's a power dynamic. There's inviting me. That's your invitation. You have the upper hand. I might want to spend time with you, but maybe I can't even access the table you're making room for, right? And so it's very important that we include ourselves in other people's lives. And again, meet them halfway, because too often I feel like I'm the one who always has to do the legwork. And yeah, sure, I'll get support doing that legwork. But again, I would like to stay home every now and then and be able to feel safe enough with you for you to come over to my house and I can show you around. And that's where the real, for me at least, that's where the real intimate bonding experience of trust and intimacy come through. And when somebody is intentional, knocks on the door to my world and says, Russell, you show me around, because I want to show people around. But too often when I try to do that without somebody asking, I'm seen as weird, or I just feel dismissed because nobody even asks if they want to enter my world. And again, why doesn't anyone ask if I want to be included in the first place? Okay, I'm going to do my last poem, right? So if you don't like poetry, sorry. If you do like poetry, sorry, because it's my last poem, right? And this poem is based on my 3 years in Los Angeles of trying to make friends. And, I moved to Los Angeles, after COVID. Thinking like, I'm going to, again, create that personal life I've always desired. I'm going to, the world has changed. Russell, it's been 20 years since your diagnosis. You're going to go there and things are going to work out. And they are working out. They are. But with a lot of growing pains, especially when it comes to making friends my age. Much easier for me to make friends over the age of 50. People my age, especially in LA, and I know I moved to probably the most superficial city in the world, but still, anywhere I move afterwards is going to be a hell of a lot better, right? So I'm setting the bar low on purpose. But this poem is called Inclusion Delusion. This inclusion delusion is one of intrusion into my world. I am plucked from seclusion to be put in this world, one of confusion, a supposed solution with no inherent conclusion. I am not yours to bring into a world I do not like, a world that I am not yours to bring into you're going to have to edit that video clip. I am not yours to bring into a world I do not like, a world that seems to spite my very face from all the nose. Said straight to that face with tears that flow, straight into my mouth, a strait of tears into the sea that is my mouth. Understand the rigor of swimming up a river so cold it makes one shiver and subsequently bitter. For the stream of apathy is there for all to see, a tributary to society that holds up a false reality. Funny how they say that I can't perceive social cues that most everyone can see, yet they can't read me, illiterate emotionally. They say that there are none so blind as those who will not see. Even when I am included, I feel so damn excluded. This milieu, I can intuit that I feel so forced into it. Rarely do they think through it that I don't even want to do it. Socialize, because they're social lies. And I despise the hollow invite just so you can sleep at night. Please do not give me that high five or say it's nice to see you, guy, when I've tried 1,000 times to hang out before tonight. So let me be. The only home I've known is one alone. I'll put an end to making friends if it means that I can spend my time back in solitude. For this world is far too rude, too crude, too lewd. I bit off more than I can chew. And I don't like what I taste. Bitterness that makes my face. Grimace from diminished self-esteem. I'm done, I'm finished. I'm going back into my world, closing the door so I can curl. Into a ball, the blinds they fall, a curtain call, farewell to all. So let me bid adieu to the few that I knew. A swan song that is sung to say so long to everyone, whose gestures were empty, and yes, there were plenty, who only showed interest because inclusion is trendy. Thank you. I initiate a lot of invitations to this day in LA. And a lot of people don't even sometimes text back. And again, I'm not saying they're doing this on purpose. It's just the state of affairs I'm in currently. A lot of people don't text back. A lot of people will leave me on read without replying. A lot of people will say to my face, Russell, let's grab that coffee. I mean, I joined a yoga studio to try to get out there in my community because my line of work, before I was hired by UCLA, unless I was traveling, I was staying at home in LA all the time. I've met amazing people all around the world, but in LA, I work from home. It's very hard for me to meet people unless I have some kind of bridge to get out there. So I joined a yoga studio. And a lot of people I met there, after, me taking classes for like a year, it takes me a long time to feel comfortable. About a year after I started taking classes there, I started opening up more, and people were like, yeah, let's hang out sometime or grab that coffee. And then we either exchange follows on Instagram or numbers, and I hit them up, and I don't hear back, or I do hear back, and they say, I'm busy this weekend, check back in with me next week. So I do that, but then they never respond to that one, so I'll do another follow-up like 3 weeks later. And they said, okay, let's do this, but then they cancel at the last moment. And it's very frustrating because these people know I have autism. I always have to disclose that I have autism when I meet someone new because they typically ask what I do for work. And they're like, oh, wow, what got you in that line of work? And I'm like, well, I was diagnosed with autism when I was 12. And I basically go into my elevator pitch of, I've lived a very unique life. I've been isolated, blah, 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 blah. So they know my background. Again, but they don't really integrate it, and they don't understand the gravity that I am really craving human connection for the first time in a while. And there's been people who say, yeah, let's grab that coffee, Russell, who said that to me over 2 years ago, and it never worked out, and I stopped reaching out, and they never reached back out to me. But I take things literally, right? I have autism. I'm a literal thinker, thus a logical thinker. I'm very logical, and I'm realizing a lot of people, specifically in LA, are not logical creatures. They run on their emotions. Half the time I'm like, am I autistic or is the rest of the world autistic? Because this just doesn't make sense to me. But I take things literally. So when somebody says, yes, let's grab that coffee, I paint a picture of what I hear. The words I hear going into my system, I'm a visual thinker, so I paint this kind of portrait, and I picture us, having coffee, and I picture a random setting, and it's an image that I can hold on to. It's rigid. It's a structure that my mental functioning mechanism can hold on to in order to achieve that task of having that coffee. But if that thing doesn't happen, then that portrait is still there, and I'm like, why is there this portrait in my head if it never happened? So 2 years later, even though we don't even talk anymore, I'm still like, why haven't we gotten that coffee? The painting's still on the wall. And it's frustrating. And I can't really call them out. I've tried holding people's feet to the fire, and oh boy, people get offended. They take it as a personal attack when I just simply say, I'm hurt because I was looking forward to having that coffee. That's all I said. And they're like, well, Russell, you don't understand how busy my life is. It's like, maybe I don't, because I have a very simple life, thankfully. I don't have a lot going on in my personal life. So now I am realizing that, a lot of people are more busy than me. But again, we need to be more intentional with the words we use, right? Especially when it comes to trying to include others in our lives. Don't tell me we're going to hang out if you know you're too busy to adhere to the words you say, right? Saying like you want to hang out with me and then saying you never have time to, that's on you. That's not on me. So don't get mad at me when I call you out. I love this quote because it kind of, again, goes to show the subtle hypocrisy in society. Don't you dare give me a high five if you aren't going to use the same hand to help me up when I fall. It's one of my favorite quotes, probably because it's my quote. But yeah, I get a lot of love when I'm functioning. I get a lot of love. I feel like I'm included when I'm traveling in the world and people post on Instagram, you're an inspiration, Russell. And I'm like, wow, like I'm really making a difference. And I am making a difference. But then, again, it's like when I start struggling in front of people, to this day, I get chewed out a lot. And I'm not sure why. Maybe I just have really bad luck encountering, accepting people in my personal life. Again, professionally, I meet amazing people, but personally, it's always been difficult. I went to go meet a friend 2 years ago. And I was having a very difficult day. And I knew this friend wasn't, I wanted to be friends with them, but I knew we didn't have the best chemistry when it came to the type of person I am and the type of person they were. But I didn't want to cancel on them due to my hard day, because they're the type of person, again, to get mad at me like, what the hell, Russell? Like, we had plans. I made room for you in my schedule. Why are you canceling on me last minute? Because I can't really tell them I'm having a meltdown because they don't understand what a meltdown is, right? And again, when I say I'm struggling, they just think I'm, oh, well, Russell, you can do this when you're feeling down. Well, again, I'm not just feeling down. I'm ceasing to function when I say a struggle. So I pushed through it, though, because I did not want to get backlash for canceling. And I go to meet them. I actually get out of the house, get to the coffee place, and I see them, and I'm just like at my limit. And I needed human connection, so I went to hug them, and I started crying. And they pushed me off. And said, Russell, I thought we were just going to hang out and have fun. This is too much for me right now. And I've had that word, too much, too much, too much. I've had those two words told to me so many times. And how incredibly selfish. Too much for you? It's too much for me. That's why I need you right now. And this is the same person that congratulates me on my vulnerable posts on Instagram. Wow, Russell, I didn't know you deal with all that. But yet, that one time I struggle in front of them, I'm seen as an inconvenience. And it's getting really annoying when people give me a high five, but then don't use that same hand to help me up when I fall. I don't want the high five then. So at least with my lived experience of autism, it is kind of like a filter where I can learn pretty quickly who I should keep around in my life, right? So it is kind of like efficient in a way, but also comes with a lot of hurt. A lot of hurt, because I reach out for support because I am a very vulnerable individual. I don't see why there's such a, shyness of talking about our struggles. We tend to talk about struggles as if they make us weak, when in reality, like, we have to be our strongest to get through that struggle. Like, I always think of struggles as, you're battle tested, right? But a lot of people see struggles as, you just don't know how to live life, like, better, I guess. So there's a lot of that. And there's this meme that I think it's a meme. I don't even know what the definition of a meme is these days. But whatever this is, I think it really resonates with what I'm saying. And that's pretty apropos, all right? And that's kind of what Autism Awareness Month feels like. It's like, yeah, high five, Russell, but, I'm not going to save you from drowning. So again, just something to think about. And again, I know a lot of this is ignorance, unintentional ignorance. There aren't a lot of mean people in my life who are doing things because they want to hurt me. Very few people want to hurt others. And, if they did, I wouldn't even be talking about him here because they wouldn't deserve my time to talk about them. These people are pretty much good people. That's why I want to connect with them. But there's just, again, we're in our silos when we're in the disability community. Too often, though, I find that when I go back into the real world, the real streets of LA, a lot of the awareness is not really translating over that well to the general public, because if you don't have a personal connection to autism or disabilities, again, it's like it would be talking to me about being a chess champion. I'm like, I don't know much about chess. You're in your chess community. You think everybody knows about chess. I don't. You see that with doctors, right? They tend to use a lot of terminology because they get used to the fact that being around their colleagues, everybody understands the medical terminology, but then they go to talk to a layperson and the person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. That's kind of what I feel like with autism awareness. It's all good and fine here, but when I go back to LA, I'm reminded that, wow, a lot of people just still don't know. So the dictionary definition of inclusion is, again, the practice or policy of including and integrating all people and groups in activities, organizations, political processes, etc., especially those who are disadvantaged, have suffered discrimination, or are living with disabilities. Inclusion is not about making room at the table. It's about building a new table together. Again, one of my favorite quotes, and you can probably guess why. My quote too. Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I never thought about it that way until one night. I'm a very reflective person, so I think a lot. Again, I think too much at times, but I was like, yeah, you know what? I always heard that inclusion was about making room at the table, but sometimes when you make room at the table, that means someone else has to give up their seat. Also, again, that's your table. And also, what if I don't want to be around everyone at the table, right? Like, what if I just want to spend time with you? Sometimes I don't want to be in a group setting to interact with you. I have, again, friends. They're good people. But sometimes they invite me out to, like, group things. I'm like, I just want to hang out with you. I don't know these other people, you know? So I was like, interesting. Well, and I want to invite them to my table. But again, then that gives me the upper hand in the power dynamic. What is something we can do where it's even? It's about creating a table together. You know? And I think, again, we too often forget about that when we're talking about inclusive environments. We set up these environments, our environments, to help facilitate others to feel welcome and that they belong. But again, it's very important to ask the people with lived experience what they need in that environment before we set it up as inclusive. Because if you built the table and then you ask the person what's wrong with the table, you're going to have to start all over. It's much more efficient before you start building the environment to, you know, get some polling out there, get ask people who are going to be in your environment what they need before you start setting it up. A lot of people don't ask me what I need. It's very weird if I think about it. You know, they just expect me to, you know, there are some friends who don't invite me out on purpose because they know I have autism, and they say, well, Russell, and I'll see them hanging out with friends on Instagram the day later, another reason I don't like social media. But they'll be like, oh, well, Russell, I didn't want to intrude because I know you like your routine, and I didn't want you to feel pressured to come. And it's like, I can say no, you can still invite me. Right? So a lot of people just, and let's be honest, a lot of people are uncomfortable around the word autism if they have no connection to it. They just don't know how to act, when in reality, I'm just a human. You know, sometimes I think it would be a lot easier if autism wasn't attached to me. It would make things more confusing for me because I wouldn't realize why I am the way that I am. But honestly, when I have meltdowns in airports and I say I have autism, I'm about to have a meltdown, my flight was canceled, and I need a quiet space to just kind of decompress, I've had many people, flight agents, whatever you want to call them, gate agents, just look at me like, I don't know what am I supposed to do with you having I don't know. It's like telling them I have a broken leg, but at the same time there's no cast on my leg and I'm standing on that same leg. It doesn't add up to them. Whereas if I said, you know, instead of saying I have autism, I need a quiet space to decompress, my flight was canceled, you know, there's sometimes I've thought about lying and saying a good friend of mine just passed away, I need a quiet space to decompress. Then they'd probably understand that I need a quiet place to decompress. But the fact that I say autism and I don't look, quote unquote, autistic, and that word makes them uncomfortable, and that they don't receive training still, American Airlines at least, they do the wings for autism, but that's for little kids. They don't do any autism training for adults. They hear autism and they clam up because they don't want to do things the wrong way, right? And therefore I don't get the support. So there are many times where autism backfires, not in regards to my own self-knowledge, but when it comes to asking for support from others who know nothing about autism. Another dive into etymology of the word isolated. Isolated comes from standing detached from others of its kind from 1740, a rendering into English of the French word isolé, I guess, from Italian isolato, in Latin insulatus, made into an island, from insula, island. The hermit who lives on a remote island is isolated from the rest of the world with nothing but coconuts and fish to keep him company. I still feel very much like an outcast, even though I'm not. Just how I've been conditioned to think of myself throughout my isolation. And in LA specifically, I feel like oftentimes I am on an island. And I see everybody on the mainland having fun, laying out on the beach, playing volleyball, having barbecue, what have you. And I want to go join them, but the thing is, I have to get off my island and swim to the mainland. And I don't even know how to swim, right? So, not a lot of people swim out to my island. Even though they see me on my island, they think I like being on the island. And sometimes I do. But again, not all the time. And then I have to form relationships in my isolation with things other people see as weird. You know, there is a commonality of individuals on the spectrum having relationships with inanimate objects. You know, I have a pillow I've slept with. I think he was in my hands on that early image I showed you when I was sucking my thumb on one of the first slides. His name is Hammer, and I fully believe he is alive. If you tell me he is not alive, I will not believe you. He has a soul, I guarantee it. He's been there. I mean, like, inanimate objects don't hurt me. Again, I can spend time with them. They can bring me comfort, but there's no risk. I remember touring a school a few years ago, and one of the teachers was saying, yeah, one of our kids has he says his best friend he calls the vacuum in the closet his best friend. His name is Tony. And they were giving a good chuckle. Isn't that cute? Isn't that funny? And yeah, it is cute for a 7-year-old, but at the same time, they're not understanding the gravity of that relationship, right? Because for that kid, that is a safety anchor. That's something that helps him. But we see it as weird or needless. But again, when I'm isolated, I'm going to form inanimate objects with even food. I remember when I was really struggling, when I was 9, my mom was driving me to a doctor's appointment. I was eating a piece of pizza. I didn't want to eat the crust. So, and I didn't know where to put it. So she said, just throw it out the window. A crow will get it. And I did, but then immediately I felt like I killed it. Like I felt like and I just started breaking down. And even just thinking of that moment, like I felt for that piece of pizza. I don't know why. I'm hypersensitive. It's just the way I am. Doesn't have to make sense. But it still hurts, right? The thing is, again, kind of a painful irony. How many people of you saw the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks? Right? So obviously he had a relationship with Wilson. And even after that movie, I started sleeping with the volleyball in my bed. I didn't draw a face on him, though. But I'm pretty sure that anybody with a heart, when they saw the part when Wilson disappeared, I forgot how they got separated, but I'm sure pretty much everybody felt that emotional tug. Yet for some reason, when we see autistic kids having a relationship with a vacuum and they start crying because they can't access the vacuum, we're like, what the hell? But with the context of Castaway, it made sense. And I wish sometimes we didn't need the context for it to make sense, that we could just take things, the kid is distressed because he wants to be by the vacuum. Well, why is that such a problem for you, right? A lot of these things make others uncomfortable. And they're like, stop doing that. And they trick themselves into saying, stop doing that because that is not usual, and that's not how things work, and it's making me uncomfortable that you want to hang out with the vacuum and not me, so don't do that. When in reality, let's meet the kid where they are. Again, enter their world. Because those little things that, again, one of my biggest comfort foods is oats, just plain oats. When I started having disordered eating in my early 20s, I would obsess about sugar, calories, carbs, sodium. So I realized oats, they don't have sodium, they have very minimal fat, they don't have sugar. I mean, they have carbs, which is good for my energy, but they had a lot of the things that I was obsessing about. They didn't have those things, right? So oats are a very safe food for me to eat without guilt-tripping myself. So over the course of the last 10, 12 years, oats have been incredibly near and dear to my heart. They are, again, a safety anchor throughout the course of my day. I have them for breakfast, I have them for lunch, and sometimes I have them for dinner, obviously with some other foods too. But I travel with them all the time. I have oats in my suitcase, right? And to give you an example of how one thing might be important for somebody, but relatively it's not important at all for the other individual, say I lived with somebody, and they knew I liked oats, but I never really confided in them how much oats mean to me because they probably wouldn't get it. So say they ate the rest of the oats for that day, I would not know what to do if there are no oats in the house, right? And then if I said, I like those oats, why didn't you just save me a little or warn me we were getting low? I might get a little annoyed with them because I tried telling them they mean a lot to me. I didn't tell them why, but again, then they get mad at me as if it's no big deal. You can just buy more oats. Well, it is a big deal for me, right? So again, let's always try to take a step out of our shoes. And sometimes when we try to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, that's still us being in their shoes, right? If I'm trying to picture being in the shoes of my friend John, that's still Russell being in John's shoes. The question is, what is it for John to be in John's shoes? Right? And we'll never know that. And that's why we have to be aware of what we do not know, because we will never know what somebody else's life experience is like for them. The fish trap exists because of the fish. Once you've gotten the fish, you can forget the trap. The rabbit snare exists because of the rabbit. Once you've gotten the rabbit, you can forget the snare. Words exist because of meaning. Once you've gotten the meaning, you can forget the words. Where can I find a man who has forgotten words so I can have a word with him? Again, when we talk about inclusion, we put a lot of effort into it, and rightfully so. Sometimes we overthink things, though, and we forget about the small, little things that mean the most. I mean, a smile is probably the most inclusive action you can ever do. But yet we rarely think about just smiling when we're trying to build an inclusive environment. Smiling says, I like you. You are welcome here. You belong. A lot of times we try to move forward our initiatives with words. But words, I mean, if you think about the most intimate moments of the human experience, a lot of times words have nothing to do with them. You know, the birth of a child, no words. Paying respect to somebody at a funeral, no words. Hugging someone you haven't seen in a long time, no words. Laughing together, no words. You know, staring into somebody you love on a date night, into their eyes, no words. It's just that raw, intimate, natural human connection. So you can forget the words if I can have the meaning. But a lot of times we say the words and there isn't much meaning behind it because we don't back up our words with action. See, the thing about using words is you are signing a contract that what you are saying you are going to back up. A lot of people aren't realizing that. They say words and they forget they actually have to follow through with it because a lot of times we speak and we don't think twice about it, myself included. It's just human nature. We need to remember, though, that the most intimate moments in life tend to be when no words are spoken. Right? When somebody can come into my world, when someone can be compassionate with me, suffer with me, when my mom can hold me or just listen to me sob on the phone. She might be saying it's okay, but she's not saying any words to help me feel better. It's simply that she's listening and validating my experience. Right? And that means more than anything. That means that even in my most difficult moments when I feel like I'm weird and other people say I'm too much, if my mom just listens to me on the phone crying into the phone, I feel accepted and that I do, in fact, belong, even in my difficult moments. Because, yeah, I know I belong when I'm like this. But if I have a meltdown in the airport, people look at me like I'm an alien or that like I'm crazy because I will still headbang. You know, it's okay for little kids with autism to have meltdowns. Apparently, it's not okay for the adults with autism to have meltdowns. So just a reminder that, you know, sometimes the answer is right in front of our noses. We just tend to be too focused on the end result of inclusion that we tend to forget about the present moment and look down at our feet and realize the answer is right in front of us. And then a short anecdote, and then I want to open it up for questions in a sec. Let me check the time. Short anecdote on the power of human connection. A policeman saved someone from jumping off a building. When asked why he did it, the policeman explained that if he hadn't intervened, he wouldn't have been able to live with himself. This illustrates the idea that true compassion and moral action often arise from a deep personal sense of integrity rather than from adherence to an external rule or reward. Within each of us lies a deep, unspoken sense of unity binding us to one another in ways we may never fully see or understand. The policeman's act was driven by an inner need to preserve his own integrity, showing that true compassion often heals both the giver and the receiver. In saving another, he saved himself. If I did not save him, I would have not been able to live with myself. And there's a lot of organizations, individuals out there, again, who kind of create the corporations specifically, who create these kind of makeshift inclusion policies just to check the box of social accountability. That think of inclusion as, you know, why do I have to put effort into this population that, you know, has nothing to do with me? Not realizing that they benefit too from being inclusive. It's not just including someone and they're the one to benefit. We all benefit from that power of human connection. You know, so when we want to include others, it's us wanting to include others. A lot of people feel like they need to include others. They don't have any incentive to want to include others, especially when they have no personal connection to autism or disability, because, you know, there's no proof that there's the connection that can be had there for them in their lived experience. So again, it's all about accepting all types, all variations of the human condition, realizing that when I accept you, you in turn are more likely to accept me, And the more different you are, the more you teach me about the human condition. And the more I feel better about myself that, yes, I am being a good citizen and a good person who's not just trying to include just for the sake of it, but wants to include to benefit both parties involved. Right? And then qualia, really quickly, is a philosophical term. Qualia is the internal and subjective component of sense perceptions arising from stimulation of the senses by phenomena. So, for instance, it's basically what we take in, our external stimuli. We might be taking in the same stimuli, but we're perceiving different things. Right? So, for an example, how do you describe the smell of grass? Like, we all know what the smell is, but if you go up to somebody and ask them what the smell is like, people are going to get different answers, right? So that's basically qualia. It's like, yeah, we're taking in the same thing, but it's all different experience for everybody. Optical illusions are a great example of this, right? A lot of people are either going to see a duck. A lot of people are going to see a rabbit. Some people, like myself, see a deformed rabbit or a deformed duck. Right? So again, what we see is not the truth. We tend to claim absolute truth based on our subjective experience, not realizing that we might be looking at the same thing, but we might not be seeing the same thing. So it's always important to realize that just because you think the truth is what you see in front of you, it's not that way for somebody else. And then a cool comic strip, right? There can be no peace until they renounce their rabbit god and accept our duck god. Right? Yeah. And then I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to save time for Q&A, but helping and supporting, there's a big distinction. Sometimes, again, we tend to help without knowing how to help, and someone might try to help me by saying, Russell, go outside and get some sun if you're feeling down, not knowing that if I go outside, it's going to increase my symptoms because I have a phobia of open spaces, and I want to feel like closed in and safe. But when they offer, like, Russell, go outside and get some sun, and they tell me what to do with the best intentions, I'm put in an awkward position now of either accepting their offer for help to my own detriment or pushing back and saying that's not going to work for me and might hurt their feelings because they feel like I'm rejecting their offer for help. So if you don't know how to help, that's fine. Just support. Support is passive, right? Helping is more active. Supporting is just being there for the individual. Okay? Compassion, to suffer with. Don't really have to fix anything. I don't really need a lot of help in my life, but I do need a lot of support. It's very important to know that it's okay not to know how to, it's okay when you don't know how to help. That's when you just kind of sit back and think about who can help, who knows this individual better than me, because I don't want to try to help if it's going to make the situation worse. I can be here for that individual until somebody can come along who knows the situation better than I do. And I'll pass through that. And then the 4 magic words when I'm going through a difficult time, if somebody is trying to help me and doesn't know how can I help? How can I help? Those 4 words have 3 profound meanings. First, you are admitting that you don't know how to help, which is a green flag, because that means, in my book, that means you're self-aware. Like, this guy knows he doesn't know how to help. Wow, that's impressive. Second, he's knocking on the door to my world. Knock, knock. Russell, how can I help? It's kind of like peeking through the window of my inner world, right? How can I help? And then thirdly, he's giving me autonomy over my own situation. He's not telling me what to do. And again, the infantilization of too often people thinking they know all about autism. Well, they don't know my autism, right? My autism is not the autism. My autism is not your autism. Your autism is not my autism, right? So a lot of people that are autistic professionals in the autism field will sometimes tell me to do something when they see me struggling, not knowing that I am my own unique creature and that they need to knock on the door to my world and put me in charge of my own struggles. You're in charge, Russell. You're going through the difficult time. You tell me, how can I help, right? So 3 profound meanings in those 4 simple words. And oftentimes, if I'm able to respond verbally, because sometimes during my meltdown, I lose the ability to speak, I will tell them, you just did. Just by asking that question makes me more likely to trust you. And when I think of something you can help me with, I will let you know, just by asking those 4 words. Okay, one more slide. I always put too many slides in these things, so I want to talk about so much. But one more slide, then I'll open it up for questions. This is a metaphor, if you will, but there are a few certain places around the world called dark sky sanctuaries. Right? And I think there's like 9 dark sky sanctuaries throughout the entire world. And these places are so remote and have no cities near them, so there's no light pollution, bless you. There is, that it can become so incredibly dark at night that you can actually see your shadow. And then you think like, well, how does that work? If it's so dark, how can you see your shadow? It's because the light, the starlight shines so brightly that you can actually see your shadow because the place is so dark. And I think that's just a beautiful metaphor for the human condition. Like, if it's true in nature that in the darkest of moments, it can actually get brighter, then it's got to be true for us because we are a part of nature, right? So I think that's just a beautiful analogy of how we are truly a reflection of this universe. And it's not cliche at all to say that, yeah, in the dark times, we find out how bright we can shine. So I'll open it up for questions now. I'll be doing, again, a book signing in the back there if you have more personal questions you'd not like to ask in front of everybody. But I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you do, too. And I know sometimes it probably doesn't seem like you're doing a hell of a lot to make a difference because you're just in it day in and day out. But let me tell you, just by being here, you are. And I want to say you guys are the reason why I do the work I do, because you are the people that I needed when I was younger and I didn't get. And that means a hell of a lot. So just by you guys showing up, that's like half the work. And you guys being intentional about being good people and helping others means a lot, because I know, again, my case is not an outlier. So thank you very much, and I'll open it up for questions. All right.
So, thank you so much. This was so impactful, and I have so many questions, but I'll just ask 2. What work accommodations do you have, and like what was that process like of getting those in place? And then what kind of therapies did your family try in the early years?
So the work accommodations, haven't really figured that one out yet, since I've only been employed by an employer since December with UCLA. The good thing about like being self-employed as my speaking career is I can give myself all the accommodations I want, albeit not in airports, unfortunately. So, you know, I just try to give myself grace. I think that's the biggest accommodation anybody can give themselves, is realizing that, you know, trying is really all there is to it. It doesn't really matter the outcome as long as we try. But in terms of the therapies, I tried occupational therapy, speech therapy, talk therapy, CBT therapy. I still do talk therapy, which is basically just talking to my therapist about my struggles 1 hour a week, which, you know, I need a lot more intensive therapy that I haven't been able to find yet. OT, speech, never really worked out when I was younger because, again, I couldn't make eye contact, I had my hood on, and for some reason those therapists would not accept that, and they would not, you know, they would, again, just, you know, here I am in therapy trying to work on these things, and again, it's just, again, I said earlier, I don't know if it's just my bad luck, but yeah, a lot of people who were supposed to help me didn't, and kind of made things worse. So unfortunately, not a whole lot of therapy I've been through. I want to explore alternative therapies. Like, you know, there's a big push for ketamine these days. Just insurance rarely accepts it, unfortunately. And so I would love to try TMS therapy too, the stimulation of the brain for depression. So I'm trying to figure out a way to do that because my insurance doesn't cover those right now. But I have hope. I mean, you know, it's the bar was set so low for me again that, you know, I know even though it's still difficult now, it's going to get better bit by bit. Yeah.
Hi, Russell. My name is Kevin. So this is actually a little personal for me. You keep on bringing up meltdowns, for example. I have, over time, I've noticed, because I've never got like the proper support with autism myself. I actually am very close to being diagnosed with autism. Okay. I'm on a 5-year waiting list right now, so this is my 5th year in to get tested for that. But one of the problems I'm seeing, because with my anxiety and things like that, if I ever get pulled over or if there's emergency situations, it makes it look like I'm emulating somebody having a seizure. And so sometimes people don't know how to react, and then it starts, I get frustrated, that internal frustration that leads into that. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, the self-injury behaviors, and I don't know how to like regulate and calm down. And then people ask, how can you help? But what happens, it takes these meltdowns for me, it could be done in 10 minutes, but it usually takes 2 to 3 days to even recover physically and psychologically from that. So what kind of strategies do you use in terms of your work-life balance, in terms of preventing some of your meltdowns?
Good question. Good question. Yeah, a lot of meltdowns, are needless, right? Again, they might help in the end, but not always. And I've definitely experienced those types of meltdowns where I call it where I'm just like emotionally hungover for like the next 3 or 4 days, where it's just like I'm completely out of capacity to do anything. And I think I'm just still learning how to deal with that. You know, the prior 3 decades of my life, I had my mom to kind of remind me that it was okay to rejuvenate, but now that I'm independent, you know, I feel bad because I'm not functioning and I can't do anything and there's really no one to help me. So I get frustrated that I can't function when I have those quote-unquote emotional hangovers. Unfortunately, I have no like solid answers for you when it comes to balancing work and life. I am realizing that, you know, what good is success if I'm not enjoying the success? And that's kind of making me reevaluate how far I push myself. And I realize too, I forget how far I've come, right? You know, my life is normal to me because it's my life. And when I reflect on my past and how far I've come, I tend to be a bit nicer to myself and give myself more grace to rejuvenate after those meltdowns. But I will say, you know, there are a lot of things that do help. I mean, obviously, you know, moderate exercise if I can muster up getting out of the house, or even just doing jumping jacks, something to get my heart rate up just for 5 minutes on the subsequent days after the meltdowns. I really try my best to hydrate and eat well, which can be difficult at times. Human connection with those I trust, even if it is a phone call. Writing, obviously, if I can write out a poem or something. But yeah, I'm kind of struggling with the same thing you are, and it's tough, you know. Existence is depleting, and it's exhausting just to show up every day, and then on top of that, have a job and all the other societal obligations. But unfortunately, I wish I could help you more, but feel free to contact me. Like if you're ever going through that situation in the future and you just want a sounding board, feel free to shoot me an email or something.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
So my daughter's 5. You talk a lot about isolation. It's obviously a different situation. We try to be as supportive as possible for her, but she prefers to be alone a lot. She's as happy as can be, but just prefers to play by herself, likes to be up in her. We have a amazing sensory room, but she could swing for hours by herself. You know, she's in pre-K. She's getting better at, you know, kids being around her. The kids love her, but she prefers to play by herself. You know, the slide where, you know, that showed the cigarette smoke and the, you know, killing you, you know, that kind of thing. We also like to meet her in her world, and we try to, you know, incorporate ourselves into her world. Like, what would be your advice for that? Like, we like to give her her time alone in her isolation and be by herself, but we also want to be a part of her world as well. So, like, how do we give her her space, but also incorporate ourselves into her world without overstimulating her or interrupting her? You know, we know when she's stimming and things like that. We need to let her be, but we want to be a part of her world, but not interrupt her world either. You know, type of thing.
It's a delicate dance for sure. For me, it means a lot when I am with somebody in the same physical vicinity, but we're doing our own thing. Like, again, one of my best friends in Los Angeles, you know, if I go over to their house, you know, I can just be doing my thing. They can be in the same room doing their thing. We're not even talking to each other. We're just basically cohabitating in that moment. And that is very soothing for me. And I realize if they accept me, if they have a good time with us not doing anything, they must really like me. And it feels really good to not have to show up and perform and have a fun time with somebody or expend energy on something other than what I want to do, and the person still enjoys my company, just they enjoy my existence. That means a lot, unconsciously, right?
So you wouldn't consider that isolating, really? You would, I mean, you know, even if we're just existing in her playroom while she's,
Yeah.
doing her swinging and stuff. We're supporting her. We're being there. That's not really her being isolated. We're in her world.
For sure,
type
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I think if she's in an environment that she enjoys and you can still be in that environment and not interrupt her enjoyment, she will unconsciously associate you with enjoyment and want to bring you in more and more as she grows older. So yeah, I think, if I was in a sensory room as a kid and my mom happened to just sit in the corner and read a newspaper and I felt like I could do my thing and feel safe, and then, gosh, my mom is here, I feel safe with my mom, kind of having that correlation, integration of that. I think as she grows older, that's going to really pay off dividends, where she can then do more active, engaging things with you and still have that sense of, wow, I'm experiencing, again, comfort when I'm in the vicinity of my parents. So delicate dance, but yeah, I think just kind of, and you can do it baby steps too. You can maybe, start moving closer as you sit more with her and then maybe engage, and maybe she'll enjoy that in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your story. It resonates with my own very much. It feels so good to be seen. I've turned my story and my suffering into passion as well, working in the intersection of mental health access and disability as a peer specialist. I help bridge the gap between the harm you described with the mental health system and the folks like us needing neuroforming access. My question is, if you had 3 wishes to change the mental health system to feel safer or more accessible for the autism community, what would they be?
That is a good one. Yeah, I think, number one, I wish there was a lot more approaches to holistic health where I don't have to get help for what I struggle with my autism and then go somewhere else for my mental health. A lot of why psych wards have always been so traumatic for me is they don't take into account my autism. They want me to adhere to the group therapy schedule and participate with the other patients when that's just not how I operate, right? So I wish, and it's becoming more, there's a lot more awareness again of this void of services, but still there's nothing being put in that void to fulfill it. So I would like more just services that center on the human, a holistic approach, validating both the autism and the mental health struggles, because obviously they feed off each other and they tend to exacerbate one another. So my OCD is vastly different than somebody else who just has OCD. And then also more validation. I think, too often, even when I see my psychiatrist and I have to, say I'm not feeling well, I think I need to go up on my Zoloft, and then, it's like I have to ask permission to feel better in a way. And I know there's red tape and all that stuff, but there's that power dynamic. I feel too often when I ask for help and professional support services, again, they're the authority figure when I'm the one who should be in charge because I know myself better than anybody else. So I feel like that power dynamic needs to be shifted and incorporated more like therapy in natural settings. Even I would love to sit on the beach with my psychiatrist, right? Why do I have to sit in an office that is cold and freezing and I'm 20 feet away from her and it's just weird, right? So integrating it more in the natural environment I think would be very beneficial. And then thirdly, I think, gosh, there's so many things I could say, but I think, this kind of goes along the same lines of letting me say what I want to work on and what I want. Because a lot of people think I want what the neurotypical person wants in life. When in actuality, I might, but I also might not. And for them to ask, okay, what do you want to work towards, Russell? And how do you want this to go for you? Rather than just saying, this is my expertise, this is what I learned in medical school, this works really well. Well, it might work really well for other people, but maybe not for me. So again, to be on the same page, because too often I find myself explaining to people in the psychiatric realm or psychological realm that I just kind of always have to explain myself. And that wouldn't happen if we started right out the gate having that vulnerable dialogue of what works and what doesn't work and giving me some agency over my own care.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
really
you're welcome.
appreciate you using your voice like this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. I hope you have a good rest of your day.